"Please don't react," Margaret whispered, leaning close enough that I could smell her familiar lavender perfume. "I need to tell you something about your son." I was standing near the dessert table at the Calgary Heart Foundation dinner, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched. The hotel ballroom was full, maybe 300 people in formal wear, the kind of event my wife Patricia used to love attending. She passed 4 years ago, and I still came every year, because she would have wanted me to. Margaret had been our neighbor for 19 years. She and Patricia used to garden together on Saturday mornings. If anyone in that room would reach out to protect me, it would be her. I kept my face still. "Tell me," I said quietly. "I was at the Kensington branch of TD Bank this afternoon," she said. "I saw your son-in-law, Robert, going in with a woman I didn't recognize. They were carrying folders, the kind real estate agents carry. Robert was pointing at something on a printed sheet and laughing. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But then I saw the address on the top of the page." She paused. "It was your address, James. Your house on Crowchild Trail." I nodded slowly. I thanked her. I told her I would look into it. And then I excused myself, walked to the far side of the ballroom, stood next to a pillar, and tried to remember how to breathe. "My name is James Calloway. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Calgary, and I retired 6 years ago with a pension, a house that was paid off, and what I believed was a family that loved me. The house on Crowchild Trail is not a mansion. It's a 4-bedroom craftsman bungalow that Patricia and I bought in 1989 for $187,000 when the neighborhood was still considered a stretch for us financially. We painted every room ourselves. We built the back deck with her father's help over one long weekend in July of 1994. Our daughter Sophie took her first steps on the kitchen floor. The neighborhood changed around us over the decades, and the house changed with it. When I had it appraised 2 years ago for insurance purposes, the number came back at $1.4 million. I remember sitting at the kitchen table looking at that number and feeling something close to disbelief. Patricia and I had just wanted a good home. We hadn't planned on it becoming that. After Patricia died, Sophie and her husband Robert offered to help me manage things. Robert is 41, works in finance, and has always had a way of talking that makes you feel like you're slightly behind in a conversation you didn't know had started. I had never fully warmed to him, but Sophie loved him, and they had given me 2 grandchildren, Lily, who was 9, and Marcus, who was 6. For them I would tolerate almost anything. The help they offered seemed genuine at first. Robert offered to take over managing the bills, since Patricia had always handled the household accounts. I agreed because grief does something to your ability to make decisions clearly, and at the time, someone else taking on that burden felt like kindness. I gave Robert signing authority on my account a limited power of attorney for household expenses. I trusted him because I trusted Sophie, and I trusted Sophie because she was my daughter. That trust had been enough for 3 years. I drove home from the gala without remembering the drive. It's a strange thing your body follows its routines while your mind goes somewhere else entirely. I parked in the driveway, sat in the car for a few minutes, and looked at the house. The porch light was on because I'd left it on a timer since Patricia died. It used to bother me, that empty light. Now it looked like a warning. Inside, I went straight to the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, where I kept physical copies of documents. I had always been particular about paper records, an old habit from engineering, where documentation was everything. I found the folder for the property and sat down at the kitchen table. Nothing was missing. The deed was in my name alone. The mortgage had been discharged in 2008. There was no indication on paper that anything had changed. But paper only tells you what's already happened. I needed to know what was being planned. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table and drank 3 cups of tea and thought about what Margaret had seen, Robert with a real estate agent, my address on their documents, laughing. The laughing was the part I couldn't stop thinking about. The next morning I called my friend Douglas Pierce. Douglas is 69, retired from the provincial government, and has the particular skill set of someone who spent 25 years navigating bureaucracy without ever losing his temper. He is also the kind of friend who answers the phone on the second ring, no matter what time it is. I told him what Margaret had seen. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want me to help you find out what's actually happening, or do you want to confront Robert directly?" I said I wanted to know the truth first. "Smart," he said. "Give me a day." Douglas had a contact at a local real estate office, someone his daughter had used when she bought her condo. He called in a favor. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Douglas called me back. "The property at your address was listed 3 days ago," he said. "It's not on MLS yet. It's what they call a pocket listing, shown privately to select buyers before it goes public. The listing agent is a woman named Diane Forsyth. The seller listed is—" He paused. "It says Robert Harrington, acting under power of attorney for James Calloway." I sat down on the kitchen chair, so hard it scraped against the floor. "James," Douglas said carefully. "You gave him power of attorney?" "Limited," I said. "For household bills. Nothing else." "You need to call a lawyer today," he said. "Not tomorrow. Today." I called a solicitor named Francis Okafor, who had been recommended to me by a colleague years ago and whose card I had kept in my wallet ever since another old habit. I told her the situation. She asked me to come in that afternoon and to bring every document I had related to the power of attorney. Francis is a direct woman in her 50s who does not waste words. She reviewed the documents I brought and then looked up at me over her reading glasses. "The power of attorney you signed is clearly limited to household expense management," she said. "It does not grant authority to list or sell real property. Whatever Robert told this real estate agent, he misrepresented his authority." "Can he actually complete a sale?" I asked. "Not legally," she said, "but he could create significant complications. He could accept an offer, take a deposit, sign preliminary documents, all of which would require legal action to unwind. The real estate agent may not have done due diligence in verifying the scope of his authority. This is a mess." She began drafting a letter to the listing agent immediately, putting them on notice that the listing was unauthorized and that any transaction would be contested. She also contacted the Alberta Real Estate Association to flag the situation. Then she asked me something I hadn't fully considered. "Do you want to press fraud charges?" I told her I didn't know yet. I needed to talk to my daughter. I called Sophie that evening and asked if she and Robert could come for dinner. I didn't tell her why. She said of course, and she sounded happy. The way you sound when you think everything is normal, and the people you love are just glad to see you. They arrived at 6:30. Sophie brought a bottle of wine and a container of the butter chicken she knew I liked from the restaurant on 17th Avenue. Robert shook my hand at the door with the confident, firm grip he always used, the kind of handshake designed to communicate that everything is fine, and he is in control. I had set the table properly. Patricia's good plates. I had made a salad. I was calm in the way you can only be calm when you've already cried everything out the night before, and there's nothing left except clarity. We ate. We talked about Marcus's hockey and Lily's reading contest at school. Robert talked about a project at work. Sophie asked if I was thinking about going to Patricia's sister's place in Victoria for the summer. I said maybe. After dinner, I poured coffee and brought out a folder and set it on the table between us. "Robert," I said, "I need to ask you about the listing." He looked at the folder, then at me. His expression didn't change immediately. There was a half-second delay where I could see him deciding how to play it. "What listing?" he said. "The listing for this house," I said. "The one Diane Forsyth put together 3 days ago. The pocket listing you authorized using my power of attorney." Sophie went still. She turned to look at Robert. "Dad," Robert said, and his voice shifted into something gentle and patient, like he was explaining something difficult to someone slow to understand. "I've been worried about you. This house is a lot for one person. The maintenance alone—" "Stop," I said. I wasn't angry. My voice was level. "I want you to answer me honestly. Did you list my house without my knowledge or consent?" A long silence. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I've had offers already, Dad. Good offers. You could take that money and move somewhere smaller, easier. A nice condo in Tuscany Hills. Or maybe a retirement. I'm 67, I said. I'm healthy. I work in my garden. I walk 3 kilometers every morning. No one has suggested to me by any doctor or any person whose opinion I trust that I need a retirement community. And no one asked me." Sophie put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were filling. "Sophie," I said more gently, "did you know about this?" She shook her head. Then she looked at her husband, and something shifted in her face. "Robert," she said quietly, "tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer right away, which was its own answer. What came out over the next hour was not a single plan, but a series of rationalizations that Robert had apparently been building for months. He had looked into the real estate market and decided the timing was ideal. He had calculated what my share would be after a sale and had apparently already identified a condo development he thought was suitable. He had discussed it with no one, not me, not Sophie, not his own parents, and had simply proceeded on the assumption that he knew best. "You were going to present me with a fait accompli," I said. "You were going to bring me an offer and tell me this was what was happening." He didn't deny it. Sophie asked him to take the children and wait in the car. He started to object. She looked at him with an expression I recognized. It was Patricia's expression, the one that ended arguments, and he went. Sophie sat across from me after they left. She was crying quietly. "Dad," she said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea." "I know," I said. "And I did know. I have known my daughter her entire life. She does not have a deceptive bone in her body. Whatever Robert's motivations were, this was his plan, not hers." "Is it too late?" she asked. "Has anything happened legally?" I told her about Francis Okafor, about the letter to the listing agent, about the steps that had already been taken. "The listing will be withdrawn," I said. "Francis is confident no transaction can be completed without my consent." Sophie nodded. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to understand," I said, "that this house is not an inconvenience for me to be managed. It is where your mother and I lived. It is where you grew up. And I will decide when or if I ever leave it." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I know, Dad, I know." The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were clarifying in the way that hard things often are. Robert retained his own solicitor briefly, apparently exploring whether the power of attorney could be interpreted more broadly. Francis sent a letter that addressed each argument with precision. The matter was resolved without litigation. The listing was withdrawn. The deposit that had been collected from a prospective buyer, and yes, there had been a prospective buyer, someone Robert had met through his professional network, was returned. Robert and I did not speak for 2 months. Sophie and I spoke often. She and Robert entered couples counseling, which I thought was wise. She told me she had not realized the extent to which Robert had been making unilateral decisions throughout their marriage, not just about my affairs, but about their own. I didn't comment on that. It wasn't my marriage. Douglas came over for dinner one Sunday, and we sat on the back deck I had built with Patricia's father 30 years ago, and I told him the whole story, from beginning to end. "You know what the worst part is," I said. "It's not the betrayal, exactly. It's what the betrayal assumes. It assumes I'm already gone, that the person who built this life, who made these decisions, who earned everything in this house, that person is just waiting to be managed." Douglas was quiet for a moment. "You're not gone," he said. "No," I said, "I'm not." In November, about 3 months after the gala, Robert came to the house alone on a Saturday afternoon. He knocked. He used to let himself in, but he knocked this time. I invited him in. We sat at the kitchen table. He had aged somehow in those 3 months, or maybe I was just seeing him more clearly. He didn't make excuses this time. He said he had convinced himself he was acting in my best interest, but that in therapy he had come to understand that he had been acting in his own interest and using concern for me as a story he told himself. He said he was sorry. He said he understood if I never trusted him again. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about Patricia, who always said that forgiveness wasn't about the other person, it was about not carrying something heavy any longer than you had to. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I want to be clear about something. I have revoked the power of attorney entirely. I have updated my own financial arrangements with my own advisors. Any decisions about my life, my health, my property, those will be made by me, with input from people I choose to consult, not managed on my behalf without my knowledge. Are we clear?" He nodded. He looked relieved and ashamed at the same time, which I thought was probably the right combination. "Good," I said. "Do you want coffee?" He said yes. And we drank coffee at the kitchen table, while the November light came through the window that Patricia had always said faced the best direction for afternoon sun. I still live on Crowchild Trail. The garden is put to bed for the winter now, but I've already ordered seeds for spring. I walk my 3 kilometers every morning regardless of the temperature, which in Calgary in January requires a particular kind of stubbornness that I have always possessed. Lily and Marcus come over most Sundays, and Marcus has recently developed a passionate interest in the model trains I have stored in the basement, trains that belonged to my own father, and that I always hoped someone would care about again. Margaret and I have coffee on Tuesday mornings. I brought her flowers the week after the gala and told her what she had done by telling me what she saw. She said she almost didn't say anything, that she worried it wasn't her place. It was absolutely your place, I told her. That is exactly what a neighbor is for. She laughed. Patricia would have told me not to hesitate for a second. She would have, I said. And she would have been right. There is something I want to say to anyone listening who recognizes any part of this story, either because it has happened to you, or because you are afraid it might, or because you love someone in their 60s or 70s, and you are not entirely sure what you have assumed about what they need. Getting older does not make you a problem to be solved. Age is not a reason to be managed without your consent or spoken over or quietly arranged around. A person who has lived 60 or 70 years has not lost the ability to make decisions. They have gained decades of practice doing exactly that. If you have family members making financial decisions on your behalf, review those arrangements now. Understand exactly what authority you have granted and to whom. A limited power of attorney is not a blank check. Talk to a lawyer. Keep your own records. Know your own accounts. And if you are an adult child reading this, please understand that helping someone is not the same as deciding for them. The most important thing you can offer the people who raised you is not management. It is presence, honesty, and the respect of treating them as the capable adults they still are. I did not lose my house. I did not lose my daughter. I did not even, in the end, lose my son-in-law, though that relationship will take time, and I am not in a hurry. What I kept was what mattered most: my home, my dignity, and the absolute certainty that my life still belongs to me. And in my experience, that is worth protecting with everything you have.